Hey, I'm Patrick. Today, I want to talk about building a startup for a specific type of customer and solving a specific problem, ideally one that you understand from your own personal experience. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about my last three startups and use them as examples because they all have different combinations of targeting and customer types and personal experiences that led to their creation. So, to start, I want to talk about Drop Commerce, my second startup, which was an e-commerce dropshipping platform on the Shopify marketplace. So it was an app on Shopify. You could install Drop Commerce, and what you would get is you would get access to a large marketplace of US based dropshipping suppliers. So these were direct to consumer brands that would offer dropshipping services through our platform. And if you don't know what dropshipping is, that's where you have an e-commerce store and you go sell products that aren't yours, you advertise them. It's essentially affiliate marketing for e-commerce products. And so once an order comes in, then our system would automatically bill you, pay the supplier, notify them, and then they would ship to your end customers. So you don't have to hold inventory. It was great. And that business was inspired by my personal experience of signing up for Shopify, trying to create a dropshipping store back in the day, and just realizing that the product quality was just horrible. Everything was coming from basically AliExpress, shipped from China. It would take sometimes like 60 days to arrive, and it was just a terrible business model, honestly. You would be trying to sell products that are worth $2 and try to sell them for like $50. I never ended up actually even launching a store because it just seemed pretty scummy to me. And I knew that there was so much of this going on. And so my co-founder and I basically came up with this idea. What if we just reach out to suppliers based in the US who are already doing real, high quality products and selling their e-commerce products in the United States? And what if we just see if they'd be willing to essentially take extra orders through our platform and ship them? And so, of course, we reached out to them and they were interested. It was a really easy sell. We basically just said, do you want more orders? You have to give at least 30% profit margin to the sellers. That was it. And so that one was easy because one, it was e-commerce. So it was already limited to and focused on a specific industry. Two, it was sort of geographically targeted as well. Like you didn't have to be in the United States to use Drop Commerce, but it was still focused on this sort of US high quality products. And I think that helped, keep the targeting down and the marketing messaging as well. So we were always able to say, hey, this is for, selling to the United States. And so I think even just the combination of e-commerce and US made it somewhat narrow. And then dropshipping was already a well-known thing. We didn't have to create that category. We were very much just offering an alternative, a high quality alternative to what was already there. So that was something that went very, very well. Honestly, still my most successful startup to date. And by far, it was the easiest journey. So we built the app. It took about, I think maybe a month to build the app or a couple months. I can't really remember. We signed up some suppliers and then we started getting installs on the first day. And from there, it pretty much just took off. And, within the first year, we were around $5,000 a monthly revenue. By the end of the second year, I think we were at around 40,000. And, to date, I think we've done over $2.5 million in sales. So it was, revenue, not sales. That's just our revenue from the subscriptions. So that worked really well because it started with something that I was just totally sure the market needed based on my own experience. And of course, you're never really sure, but I felt really confident because I just knew that it wasn't an option and I knew I wanted it. And so that was a great place to start. And then we kind of validated it by just immediately contacting suppliers and seeing if they were interested in offering the products. And so then that was enough, and then we built it. Now, on to my next startup, which is Frontly. It's a no-code app development platform. And it also started by sort of scratching my own itch. In this case, based on my experience building Drop Commerce and being the lead developer for multiple years, I really felt that the process of building apps was just too time consuming, and I felt like there was a lot of repeated code, and I just felt like a no code solution, which I didn't even really know was a terminology at the time. I felt like that would be something very powerful. I was a bit naive. I didn't really realize that there were already some solutions in the market. And when I started, I ended up building for a long time without really validating the demand externally. So that was probably one of my biggest mistakes, was just not really being as realistic, not really seeing what was out there in the market before spending time investing in that. And I actually started with a different business model. My idea was I wanted Frontly to be for backend developers to easily create user interfaces without really having to code them. So it was going to be essentially sort of like a no-code builder for backend developers who maybe didn't even care that much about front end, but they knew they needed that user interface. And so that was the idea. And when I started building, that's what I was building. But I made the mistake of basically just talking to whoever would talk to me about it and letting their opinions sway my direction. Now, you should talk to your customers, potential customers, but the difficulty is really discerning who is the right type of customer and who to listen to. Because I talked to a lot of investors who had no idea about what I was, building. They weren't developers. They didn't really understand the challenges. And I talked to a lot of engineers who, for different reasons, maybe weren't the right type of customer, wrong size of company, or whatever. And so I'm not even saying that path would have necessarily worked, but what it would have done is allowed me to target backend developers. Even just starting with backend developers, which is still pretty broad, would have been very useful because they, in general, would have sort of a collective mindset that's a bit different than other segments, other markets. So that would have been a good place to start. And then probably over time, if I had spent enough time talking to them and learning, hearing their objections and their excitement and all the variations of conversations, I probably would have found a way to narrow it down further. Maybe different sizes of companies and then backend developers within those companies, or maybe certain use cases that would have proved to be the highest ROI or something like that. And so this is just one example. What I ended up doing was building this Google Sheets integration and sort of opening up Frontly to be more of this generic, like build an app of almost any kind. It wasn't really clear whether it was for public-facing apps or internal tools, and I didn't really know who to target. It's people who use Google Sheets is way too big of a market. That's probably, 1 billion people or something. So that's been my challenge, and I realized through a few years of trying to market Frontly that I just couldn't figure out who to even reach out to. When an investor would ask me, or when a customer would ask me who Frontly is for, I wouldn't really know what the answer was. And so I think kind of hard to untangle that once you've already built a company and you have all these users and revenue and stuff like that. This caused a lot of challenges, and I learned a lot from that experience. So when I started building my most recent startup, Curator, I once again built it based on a problem that I had personal experience with. When I was building Frontly's AI app generator, I learned the hard lesson that when you try to generate something long or complex with AI, if you just try to do it all in one shot, it's very unlikely to be exactly what you wanted. And in our case, it was an app. So it had multiple different layers. It had your sort of data layer. It had these user interface elements and all these little decisions. And so even though the AI is making a lot of these decisions, we realized that if the user didn't have any input along the way, the final result would not really be what they wanted. And then that's kind of awkward because now they have to figure out how to edit it. It's taking away some of the excitement of this AI process. So what I did was I split it up into about 6 steps. And so at each step, the user would see what it had generated, this little piece, and then they would be able to revise it right there in the user interface manually. Once they confirmed that it was what they wanted, then the system would go and generate the next layer. And so it would build on top of this in 6 layers. And that was very, very effective because once you get to layer 3, you know that everything before that is something that you approved and confirmed. So I ended up seeing that created much, much more value in Frontly's system. And at one point, I pretty much had this idea, like, what if that's actually a way bigger problem that goes way beyond Frontly and AI app generation? What if this is a problem that everybody's experiencing with AI content generation. Like maybe you're generating a blog, probably not going to generate the entire thing in one go. Maybe you generate the outline, and then once you've approved the outline, you can generate the sections, something like that. And so that was kind of the origin of Curator. But then over time, I started realizing that people are already using these automation platforms like Make and Zapier to, build their automations, and they're integrating AI, and, there's all these AI sort of agent platforms coming out. And so I thought, instead of trying to be another platform that's going to sort of try to convince people to generate everything within our platform, I thought everyone's already using these other platforms. Maybe Curator could just be this thin layer, this approval layer that you can easily add into your existing flows. And so that's how Curator came to be. And I'm not saying that we figured it all out, because we're only just getting started, but I'm planning on being very public and documenting this process as we figure out how to narrow things down further. So right now, we're targeting AI automation users and agencies. And so far, we're getting a pretty good response rate, but we're going to be able to target way more narrowly once we have more conversations. So right now, that's our only goal, is talking to as many users of these automation platforms as possible, talking to other people who maybe aren't using those platforms to see if there are opportunities outside of that. But most importantly, there's at least a somewhat specific kind of narrow use case, and it's not industry specific. It's not like we're just targeting the dental industry or something like that. But I do think it's narrow enough to give us something to kind of grab onto. Whereas with Frontly, I felt like it was pretty vague, and I wouldn't know who to reach out to. If I was to do, LinkedIn outreach to try to find customers, it's unclear who I would reach out to. Just business owners or someone like that. That's way too broad. And so for Curator, at least we get to start with anyone that's talking about AI automation in their profile, or if their business is about that. And then over time, once we figure out really, even higher ROI use cases, maybe there will be some industries that stand out as clear winners. And maybe we do tighten it up and focus just on one or a few different industries. So I'm really excited to see how this goes. And I'm only just sharing my experience. I'm not pretending to be an expert, but I've had a lot of time to think about these mistakes that I've made, or the journey that I've been on. And so I'm just sharing that here, and hope it's interesting. And I'll be continuing to post a lot of videos and make posts on LinkedIn about my process building Curator and finding product market fit, hopefully. So if you want to follow along, that's what you'll get. Thanks for watching.